Brill. Well, in the interest of time, I know there's a few people still joining, but I'll get going and hopefully people can join us and when. But thanks again for all joining us today. When we compare our world today to where we need to be, the changes that need to be achieved are vast. Banks and asset management firms representing 40% of the world's financial assets have pledged to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 using the science-based guidelines, and emissions related to regulation have already ramped up for large and listed businesses. But it's not just large corporations which need action. In 2020, there were over 5 million small businesses in the UK. These accounted for 22% of the economy. And we cannot stabilise our climate until we all get to net zero. To get there will mean venturing into uncharted territory, especially for those smaller firms with less resources. Getting there will mean rethinking business priorities, considering new operational best practices, and ultimately treating carbon as carefully as we do financial budgets. I'm joined by some highly esteemed and incredibly influential speakers who will help us unpick what you can do as a business to start having a positive impact. So I'll hand over to Adam first, if you would give me a quick introduction of yourself and the business that you work with.
Thank you very much. My name is Adam. I'm the founder of Small 99, and we're an action kind of tech platform to help small business owners, typically micro business owners, take action on climate change and know where to start and kind of get towards net zero as quickly as possible, ideally in 5 years. So we've got a target of 1 million by 2025.
Great. Thank you very much. And Loz, I'll come to you next.
Hello, I'm Laura Gelder Robertson. I am a TED talker. So I did a TED talk last year on facing into climate change as a parent. I'm an assessor on the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership Climate Change business course and climate consultant. So I collaborate quite a bit with Sam actually on a business called Low Carbon Leaders to help small businesses accelerate their path to net zero. And I'll pop a little link into some of those things into the chat. So as Adam and Sam are talking, I'll just add links in as we go.
Excellent, thanks Laura. And last but not least, Sam, did you want to give us a bit of an overview or introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thanks Emma. Hello everybody. Yeah, my name's Sam Zindel. I'm Managing Director of a digital agency based down in Brighton. We're a 40-person business, so definitely in the small category. And we recently became a certified B Corp, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about on this call. As Loz also mentioned, I set up a climate consultancy called Low Carbon Leaders. So now I'm also working with other businesses like the one I'm MD of to help them transition to low carbon ways of operating and achieve net zero.
Great, thank you very much. Sam, we'll come to you first. It would be great. Oh, before we go to you, it'd be good to have a look at the poll. So it's quite interesting to see the biggest thing that is making a difference, which is important. So that is good to see that everyone is really keen to have an impact in the audience. Thank you very much. So Sam, we'll come to you first. I know your business has been on a huge transformation journey. It'd be great if you could give us an overview of what you've been doing.
Yeah. Absolutely, Emma. Yeah, I've got a few slides, so I'm just going to share my screen so that everybody can see what I'm going to be talking about. Just bear with me for 1 second while I sort that out. I suppose the key thing for me to land before getting into more of the detail is that just 3 years ago, I would have classed the business that I'm managing director of as a sort of environmental moderate. And I do think that what we've done in the last few years represents a whole community of businesses that haven't necessarily paid a great deal of attention to climate action or to the environment, and that's completely fine. I think most people are actually only really just getting their heads around it. But I'm going to spend the next sort of 5 minutes or so running through some of the core things that we've done over the last 2 years. So I mentioned this in my intro, that we became a certified B Corporation. Now, not everyone on the call will know what a B Corporation is potentially, but ultimately what we've done is we've gone on a process to include the environment and social impact as part of the stakeholders of our business. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So there's a lot of B Corps, and it's a very fast growing movement. Here's just some companies that are part of the B Corporation community. These are the projected figures for people certifying for B Corps this year. It's sort of doubling every year at the moment. The organisation that runs the B Corp movement is called B Lab, and they basically conduct a very detailed audit of your business and how you make decisions in order to certify whether or not you can become one. The B Corp movement was founded essentially off the back of Milton Friedman's principles of shareholder-based capitalism in 1970, when he wrote an essay for the New York Times. And businesses have transitioned since then, increasingly over the last decade, towards a different type of capitalism, where the primary goal isn't just to make high profits for a small group of shareholders. And this transition is often referred to as moving from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And what's been really interesting of late is that some of the most prolific and well-respected business and finance publications have started writing about this concept of seeing stakeholders as a broader set of factors in a business than just the shareholders. And PricewaterhouseCoopers conducted a report just before the pandemic hit about the pace of growth of companies that are adopting this principle and becoming certified B Corps. Really interesting to note that actually this is a good thing to do for business as well as for the environment and other stakeholders within the business. When I talk about stakeholders, these are the 6 areas that I'm really focused on. So it's looking at the people that work at your company, the customers of your company, your supply chain, the environment, the community, and the social impact that you can have. And of course, shareholders are still a very valuable part of a business's stakeholder makeup, but they're only one of 6 and not bigger than any of the others. This is a quick insight into the B Corp assessment portal that you have to go through in order to become a certified B Corp. The magic score you have to get across these 6 areas is 80. Once you get over 80, then you become a certified B Corp. And for most companies, that takes about a year in terms of a process to go through. There's a lot of new policies that need writing often because there's blind spots. Even a company like ours, I should have mentioned the name of our company, it's PropellerNet. We thought we were a B Corp in waiting, but when we went through this process, we realized how far we had to go in order to achieve that status. So this was a really inspiring journey for us to go on, and what the B Corp movement gave us was a complete blueprint of how to run our business in what we believe is a really relevant way for the 2020s. And one big part of the B Corp certification is about addressing your environmental impact as a company. So I'm just going to spend the last couple of minutes talking about what we've done in this area in particular, as I know that's the theme of today's call. So there's a brilliant website called the Climate Action Tracker that anyone can access. It's updated sort of quarterly. And this maps against business and governmental pledges and targets that have been made and how that relates to the science-based target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, which I'm sure most people on this call will have heard about or read about already. And I guess the summary of this graph is that we're woefully behind where we need to be. And actually the pace of change that's required is getting quicker and more urgent than it ever has been. And it's quite daunting for businesses to face into this and to look at it in the eye and think about what their role as a company might be. I do a lot of work outside of my role as an MD, speaking to other businesses. And what I'm getting a sense of, and that poll also suggested it that you put up, Emma, that most companies want to act and want to do something, but perhaps are not quite sure where to start. And the most common barriers that seem to appear with most decisions in business are lack of time and lack of funding. But one of the things that I talk about a lot is actually the time barrier can be broken down by considering the risk by not acting and not acting quickly. And the money barrier can be broken down by thinking about, actually, this is a really big opportunity for our business. So spinning the whole thing on its head, and rather than thinking about the fact we are limited with our resources to act on the climate, really seeing the opportunity and the risk mitigation that's available for businesses. If there's anything that anyone takes away from this part of the call, I would hope it would be these 5 things. I talk about this in every talk I do around the climate. This was from a course I attended at Cambridge University, where the ex-VP of Sustainability of Unilever, Sue Gerard, presented these factors in terms of building a business case for action on the climate. So 1 is to drive growth, 2 is to reduce long-term costs, even if there's short-term investment required. 3 is to mitigate the risk associated with the degradation of our climate and how that also affects things like our supply chains. 4 is to build trust in your brand, which most companies are always aiming to increase. And 5 is to engage and attract the best talent in the market, because more and more people are thinking about this and want to work at companies doing the right thing. So the question probably everyone might have on this call is, well, where would I start if I haven't started yet in my business, and how can I have the maximum impact? And Adam and Loz are going to fill in the gaps with that and give us some really great advice shortly. But very quickly, to bring it to life for PropellerNet, the company that I run, these are our environmental targets. So we're aiming to halve our emissions by 2025. We've measured our carbon footprint already, which is a step that a lot of businesses haven't taken. We've also recognised that we've been trading nearly 20 years and we want to offset all of our historic emissions. Microsoft is probably the highest profile company that have committed to this kind of pledge already too. We achieved our target last month of becoming zero waste, and we're also investing heavily in nature restoration work. So we've committed to planting 1 million trees, mostly in the global south, by the end of next year. And that 1 million tree idea really bore fruit, if you want to excuse the pun, where we co-founded a pledge called the 1 Million Tree Pledge that any business on this call or otherwise is invited to sign up for. There's a website, milliontreepledge.org, and it really gave us a bold vision and an energy around our climate action, which the whole team got behind right at the start of when we started doing things. We're already a third of our way to our target, as this dashboard shows. And we love to visualize our tree planting to bring it to life for our team on our home cities. So we have this map of Brighton, and then we colour in the areas of Brighton that our trees take up if we were to plant them in our local area, which is a really nice way to engage the team in what we're doing. And the final thing I'll say is that our climate action has helped the business grow by 30% year on year as we attract more sustainably minded brands to our agency. Not only that, but 100% of the people that work for us have given us feedback on how much this plays a role in their sort of day-to-day thinking about the business, to the point where everyone sacrifices a small element of their salary each month and puts it into our climate action work. So I have to say, you know, having taken these steps, we're really impressed with the impact it's had, not just on how we feel about what we do, but also our business trajectory as well has been amplified.
That's amazing. It's pretty impressive how all of your stakeholders internally have got on board with your transition as well. And it's quite interesting what you've said about this from a recruitment perspective, because what we're seeing in the market is that the ESG factors are playing a huge part in decision makers of candidates and clients. We actually did some research recently on this, so I've got some stats I've pulled out, and it's 30% of workers will look for a new job unless ESG activity is increased. 53% of people won't work for an employer that doesn't share their ethics, and just around 1 in 5 of 18 to 34-year-olds list corporate values above salaries. So I appreciate these stats encapsulate the full ESG, so not specifically focused on environment, but from my conversations with candidates, it's increasingly becoming a focal point. I'm not sure if many of you on the call are aware, but the recruitment market is incredibly hot right now, with staff retention and talent attraction harder than ever I've seen it before. So looking at this can save you quite a few headaches down the line as well. Moving on to businesses in general, many businesses are small and maybe feel it's down to the bigger corporations to have the main bulk of the difference that they need to make up. Adam, handing over to you now. I know that you're in a hotel lobby, but if you could give us your insight on what you think on this one.
Yeah, I think it's a really key one, and this is a common thing that I hear when I speak to small business owners, from small cafe owners, hairdressers, pubs, whoever it might be, that think they don't have the power or the impact to make a difference. It was really interesting that making a difference was the first one that came up here, and not the where to start thing. But ultimately, not to be too blunt about this, if we put ourselves in this situation with the climate, we can also get ourselves out of it. And there are 6 million businesses in the UK, and most of those are small businesses who make up our high streets, who make up our co-working spaces, our offices. All of those people can make very small decisions to really make a difference. And I think that's really the key message, is that you're already making environmental decisions in your business. You're just maybe not aware of it in terms of taking into account that environmental side. So it's not about necessarily making this big dramatic statement and rebuilding your entire business from the ground up. It's about taking your existing decisions you're making and going, well, actually, how can we make a positive impact to the environment or to kind of society through those decisions we've already made.
Great, thanks so much for that. As mentioned earlier, it is uncharted territory for many firms going into this, and resources are pretty few and far between, or there's so much out there, it's quite hard to get your head around sometimes. Loz, I know that you've been supporting a lot of businesses as well. What tips have you got for firms looking at this, or what should people try and avoid, or what insight can you give there?
Yeah, no worries at all. Well, it's interesting. It's like $1 million question, or a bit of a holy grail. We've spent about 2 years between the three of us trying to answer it. And let me share what we were talking about this at Cambridge yesterday, actually. I'm going to share a little slide, because I think of it as a bit of a spectrum in terms of the resources that are available. Let me just check you can see that okay. Give me a thumbs up, Emma. Yeah, grand. So in its simplest sense, you can come to webinars like this and just get some basic information and start to kind of orient yourself around what you might do to approach net zero. There are lots of courses available. So there's a short course that's currently being run by Sustainability Basics from Small Business Britain, which Adam is part of. Obviously, I'm an assessor at Cambridge. They do an 8-week short course. Sam is about to launch a series of workshops for small businesses from Clean Growth UK, and we'll put these all into the chat so you can have a look at places where you can get some really targeted education that's specific to small businesses. Really, in terms of understanding what your carbon footprint is, there's 2 different tiers to it. So if you look at the spend-based tier, around 60%, this is where you can get a piece of software that you plug into your accountancy software, and it looks at how you spend your money and therefore the type of emission or the volume of emissions that you're probably going to be creating. Now, Adam's actually just building a tool for small businesses up in Glasgow with Compare Your Footprint that's about to get launched. I don't know when it's going to get launched. Adam, put it in the chat, tell us when. But some of the other companies that we generally point people towards are Spheric. So I know Adam has close links to Ecology Zero. They've just launched this week, and it's a free tool, so that's interesting. Adam's isn't that expensive to put a plug in, but I mean, obviously we've worked with these tools, so we know what you can get from them. Ditch Carbon, again, you can just if you're on Zero, on QuickBooks, on Sage, they just allow you to plug in and calculate a snapshot result. And Normative, I'm just mentioning because the SME Climate Hub, which is a great source of overall hub of information for SMEs, is particularly talking about Normative at the moment for getting a snapshot. And it's a bit it's not 100% accurate, because not every type of emission that your business creates will be something that you spend money on. But it's a really good way of getting an overview of where the bulk of your emissions are likely to lie, so you can get started. Because a lot of small businesses aren't necessarily thinking about having a budget and a person dedicated to figuring this out. There's a bit of behaviour change, a bit of kind of steering of your ship to kind of gravitate towards getting your head around it and what you could do. At the far end, you've got activity based. So you could hire a consultancy and say, I don't have the expertise in my business to calculate my carbon emissions. So I'm just going to go and find someone who can go through literally activity by activity of my business and help me understand exactly what a more accurate picture would look like. Very difficult to get to 100%. So the reason it's at 95% is it's very hard to measure everything that you do in a granular way to prove that these are the amount of emissions you've got, but there's some really clever brains behind it, and there is an overall framework called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol that guides these consultancies. So the Carbon Trust is really reputable. They'll give you an accreditation so that you can say with confidence to your customers and clients and your other stakeholders, this is what our carbon footprint is. C3, again, another really great consultancy, Planet Mark, we do lots of collaborations with. So, it's a journey. And the main thing to say here is that the idea isn't you have to be perfect, that you have to wait before you act until you've got this 100% perfect picture. The general guidance that you can get from sessions like today and from the Small 99 website, Adam, you've pulled together a really good fag packet questionnaire that takes less than 5 minutes that will allow people to get started, and we'll add links into the follow-up so you can have a look at it. But yeah, it's really, really important just to go through the simple questions, start to get your head around what types of emissions might I be creating, and where does our focus need to lie as a business, and how can I start to engage my people in what we're doing here. So I don't know if I should go on to that yet. I think that might be the next section, Em. I'm looking at you now.
No, I think that's great. Go on to the next bit.
So the only final thing I was going to say is, you mentioned about TCFD before. So there's a new piece of legislation that's just come in April. It's the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. And this is where large businesses, so any business that's got more than 500 employees or that makes more than £500 million a year, has to, in its annual report, assess its climate-related risk. There's also the sustainable disclosures requirement, which the Treasury brought in during COP26. And that's slightly different. It's not just assessing the climate-related risk for that business. It's looking at, so what impact are they contributing that is part of the carbon footprint of the country. So it's both looking at the inaction. If they're not taking action, they're going to start getting pressure from regulatory bodies and the government. And as a small business, as an SME, you will probably form part of some larger business's supply chain. So they're going to start being asked to measure it. You will be part of their carbon footprint analysis. At some point, someone's highly likely to come along and knock on the door and go, what's your carbon footprint? What's your plan? And if your answer is, I don't know, it will become more of a discriminator in how they make choices around who they choose for their suppliers. Because obviously, if you're doing something and actively reducing your emissions, you'll be brilliant to have as part of their carbon footprint. And like Sam says, the B Corps are so attractive because they're so ambitious in how they're moving and accelerating towards net zero. It actually becomes a real driver. I'm sure part of the reason that PropellerNet won the Superdry account is because of their very ambitious move towards having low carbon emissions. So lots to be won there, lots of positivity around that. I think that was all I was meant to talk about in that bit.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. I guess kind of moving on from that, you can see the big businesses are kind of getting hit by a stick and told you have to change, you have to do this regulation. And for the small businesses, that is coming. But if you could see it as a carrot, which is an act now rather than have it as a stick in 3 years' time, that's probably a better way to address it. Before I pass over to Katrina to run through some questions, it'd be good if you could give us a bit of an insight, like what are the best high impact and achievable steps that you could take to have a positive impact? Like what are the key things that you think if you take away from this, they could get on and do?
We had a little chat about this the other day. Do you want me to do the 3 things that we were talking about, boys?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Hoping that comes up correctly. Okay. So really, really simply, you can't manage what you can't measure. You'd never have run your business finance by not having a good picture over your profit and loss. In the same sense, it's very difficult to set yourself targets and meaningful goals if you don't know where your start point is. So the obvious start point is find out what your carbon footprint is, even if it's a fag packet calculation on Adam's website or one of the software plugins. It's just that's your start point. The second bit then is around how you create a vision within your business for where you want to head. This is something that should be opening up huge opportunities because the whole of the market and the world needs to turn this way. There's bound to be opportunities for your business to grow in the products and services that you offer, and getting your team involved in it. It really connects people into purpose and into a purpose beyond profit that includes the planet and includes people, which is massively engaging, a part of why the B Corps are so rapidly growing and doing well. So unleashing people's passion and knowledge and really allowing everyone to chip in and be part of it is really important, really helps with attracting the best talent and retaining people as well. And someone mentioned in the chat, how do we make time for this? Because we're coming out of COVID, there's cost implications, we've got to educate people and get their heads around it. There is a really positive, uplifting conversation to be had around taking positive action. And most of your employees will probably be quite interested and wanting to contribute in some way if you can figure out a meaningful way for your business. I was in a builder's merchant in Sussex last week. They've converted their entire forklift truck fleet to electric vehicles. And the guys on the shop floor were saying, we don't have to fire up a diesel engine and work in smog. We work in this beautifully clean warehouse now, managing timber. They're quicker to operate. It's much cleaner air. It's a much better place to work. And their engagement is just instantly uplifted by it. So simple choices that can have quite profound impacts. The third bit's communication. Adam talks a lot about not green hushing. So we talk a lot about greenwashing, which is where you're not actually reducing emissions. You're just talking a big game. You have to have some plan that you are moving along. But it's also really important to share where you're struggling, because it invites other people in your community into, I know someone, if I put on LinkedIn that I'm struggling with a problem, instantly I have a little community of people saying, I know someone who can help you with that, or have you found this little organisation, or there's someone in your area who's had this problem, they've solved it. We all win or we all lose. So the more we can talk about our successes and share where we've found ways to solve problems, but also the things that we're grappling with that we need a bit of help with, I think the quicker we'll all move in the right direction. And it's good for building trust in your brand. It's that level of transparency that says, we're not trying to pretend we're perfect, but we are trying to make a difference. And you've got the intention there, which is, I think, what stops people saying you've got your greenwashing. But most important of all, act now. If there's one thing that I could let you take away, it would be you do not have to be perfect. There are lots of people that that really want to help. We will put a little list of links into a follow-up slide, so you've got lots of great resources to signpost you towards. But come back to us. We've got links into this. Follow Adam, follow Sam, follow me. We're always talking about interesting things, sharing the latest solutions and grants and information that we're coming across. So any way that we can help, I think is really good. Yeah, and there's a little campaign that I think was put into the link there as well, called the Jump campaign. It just came out last month from Leeds University and Arup and the C40 cities globally, and they came up with 6 actions that, if you took them, would reduce emissions. Oh, what have we got? A quarter of the emissions would be reduced to reduce global warming by doing these 6 actions every year. And they're more things that you would do as a human being rather than necessarily as a business. But it's a super interesting initiative. So I'll stick that in the chat now and you can have a look at it as well.
Amazing, thanks, Laura. On the communicate piece, I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I remember you telling me a really interesting story about the brewers, that there was some technology in Texas and they wanted to get it over because it really improved their emissions, but they were too small. Did you want to give that story? Because I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, there's a microbrewery. I live in Gloucestershire, and Sadea Brewery, their biggest source of emission, they brew and create carbon. They also use carbon dioxide as a feed into their brewing process. Horrendous at both ends. But they found a small technology company called Earthly Labs in Texas, who've created a miniature carbon capture and storage technology, so they can literally cap the emissions that they're creating and use it to feed back into the start of their process. Normally, carbon capture and storage is phenomenally prohibitively expensive. So what they did was formed a cooperative across the UK of other microbrewers who are interested, because they're all trying to solve the same problem. They all want to be more sustainable, and that's their biggest source of emissions. And they're trying to effectively create a little market, a big enough market that Earthly Labs can come over from the States and fit this technology at a cost-effective price. So they're creating like a buying club, if you like, between them to solve a problem as small businesses. So yeah, that would make a huge difference if they can do it.
Absolutely, and then you feel better drinking your beer as well, so wins all round. Katrina, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thanks Emma, and thanks everyone for that information. Super interesting. I thought for me, a big takeaway is the we all win or we all lose piece, and the stories that you've said there and about collaborating with different kind of organisations and people together. That's yeah, really, really interesting, and some really good stories there. So I'll let the speakers kind of take a moment to get their breath back. And if the audience, if you've got any more questions, please do pop them in the chat. And so in the meantime, I know we've got Bernadine on the line from Protiviti, who's involved in our UK risk and compliance ESG offering. Bernadine, sorry to put you on the spot here, just while we leave the speakers to have a think about some of those questions that have come through, and I'll come back to them in a moment. Are you able to share some of the challenges that we've seen with our clients in this space and how we've supported them to overcome some of these?
Sure. Thanks, Katrina. And thanks to our speakers for some fantastic insights and really practical suggestions today. I'd say that we see a really wide variety of responses at the moment. So some of our larger clients are finding that collecting data which is accurate and complete is a challenge. Sometimes meaningful data needs to be still developed or is not readily available. And I think another big challenge can be the culture shift and making sure that senior managers are brought into changing the business discussion and making climate risk relevant throughout the whole organization. That shift to stakeholder capitalism that we heard about earlier. So the ESG team at Protiviti, we've been supporting our clients with those challenges, including helping them in areas, for example, working out a strategy and a plan to respond, identifying and mapping the risks to products and clients and services, because we know that there's big change coming up, mapping out their data requirements and how they'll measure and report these, and providing training for their people. But in summary, I think everyone's at very different stages and there's very different challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Bernadine. Yeah, and it's in relation to a lot of the challenges that kind of Laura mentioned there about acting now. So what would you say maybe I'll direct this back to Laura. What would be your largest pushback that you've seen from the businesses that you've worked with? And also thank you so much, Bernadine, by the way, for that. That was good insight. Thank you.
Definitely overwhelm of information. So I think one of the biggest problems is, even if you go to SME Climate Hub, which I think is actually a really good resource, there's loads of stuff in there. There's like tons and tons of reports. And what I really like about following someone like Adam on LinkedIn is Adam's very good at pithily sort of thin slicing through all of that data and going, right, transport, this is what we're thinking about today, or, you know, buildings, this is what we're thinking about, and here's really good stats on it, and here's, you know, 3 actions that you can do, or here's some is a balanced view of some of the solutions that are out there. We're always trying to look at what the latest solutions are, and also how can we get people to think more collectively about it. The idea here isn't that you always think as a small business in isolation how you solve a problem, because the infrastructure and the funding isn't necessarily perfectly in place from the government yet. So where you're in a geographic location and you can find other small businesses that are trying to solve a similar problem, normally you can pull together quite quickly, even if they're a slightly different sector, and you can come up with a solution that's going to be beneficial to all of you and much more cost effective, also builds community. So I think as soon as you start these conversations, if you start to communicate on LinkedIn and your other social media platforms about your intention, if you start to set targets and talk around initiatives you're taking, other people gravitate towards you, and then you'll immediately start discussing problems that you're having and how you can solve them together. So I see it very much as a community and a collective. You know, we need to think more systemically about how we're making decisions and not just always in isolation. Easier said than done, but I think the more you talk and engage with the wider environment, the more quickly you'll find these communities.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Laura. And there's lots of stories about different organisations kind of changing their processes and actually sharing those with other companies. I know Levi's really changed how they kind of dye their jeans and their denim, and were very vocal about that and wanted to help others. So I think to continue that with like the brewery company that you spoke about as well, yeah, it's great to have that collaboration and to feel all just part of one team. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Just having a look at some of the other questions that have come through here. How has hybrid working been affecting businesses?
I come in on that because I've got direct experience in managing a hybrid team now. In fact, I say hybrid, we're remote first. I think on average people come to our office now 1 day a week. So we're definitely down that end of the spectrum. And I think obviously thinking about this purely from an environmental standpoint, it's a bit of a double, 2 sides of the coin. So we've reduced commuting to much lower levels. We've also reduced a lot of our office energy consumption and use, albeit, you know, we've consolidated from 3 floors down to 1, so that's great. However, that 1 floor has to be serviced with energy provision and heating and cooling, for example, just as much if there's 1 person there or 40 people there. So there's something for us to work out there and the best balance. I suppose one of the key things that we've now taken into account with our carbon emissions, and I did pop it in the chat there as well as an answer, is that we've seen individual homes as part of our office. So we collect data from individuals about their energy consumption during the day, and we include that in our carbon footprint. We also understand from them the amount of digital touch points they've had. So messaging services, video calls like this, which obviously have a carbon footprint, albeit quite micro. So yeah, we've been able to take that into account. I do think that on balance, particularly when you then include client meetings and traveling the length and breadth of the country in the service sector like we've been used to doing, it's a net positive for the climate. Absolutely. I think that absence of travel is worth far more from a carbon reduction perspective than people working from home and spending more time in their homes, perhaps heating them over the winter. So my conclusion from our 40-person business is that this has reduced our carbon footprint overall, albeit there are new elements to our carbon footprint that we now have to consider.
Yeah, and it's awesome that you're including the kind of working from home data, and people's actually, I mean, so many people are still working from home. Their office is and all like the electricity and things like that is hard to track. So to have that kind of full coverage and including that data in what you're looking at. I think that's awesome, and it must be hard to collect that information.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I was just recalling how we had to really apply a little bit of pressure for people to supply the information. It's kind of like timesheets and some anyone that's been responsible for that job of chasing up things like timesheet data, it's very similar to that, and we only ask for it periodically. I think the thing about carbon footprinting, it's the kind of thing you would do probably once a year, maybe once a quarter if you're really keen. So we do kind of just ask people to perhaps invest an hour of their time collecting their energy bills once a year, which isn't too much to ask. But I think the key is going back to the point that Loz made earlier on. Our team is so engaged with this topic now because we've created a strong vision and got momentum and energy behind it. They see this as a really welcome thing to provide and are actually happy to supply it. So, I know we're quite a small business, so we probably don't have it as hard as some that have to get a lot more data. But I would, again, emphasize the point. There are dormant opinions and attitudes in your business right now about people feeling helpless about climate action. And I think if you can inspire them within your business, you're actually unlocking a whole series of energies that you didn't really realize were there. And we've now got 2 working groups that are established in our business. One is focused on carbon reduction, one is focused on restoring nature. And they're both really engaged teams putting their own time into it. And as I mentioned before, even contributing financially towards it as well. So, really would encourage everyone on this call to consider that benefit to the business and the value that might bring.
Yeah, great. Cool, thank you. Just thinking there as well on that point, with kind of data and collecting information from the companies that we're looking at here. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic has significantly impacted transport, how we're kind of conducting meetings, whether they're face-to-face or at home, and thinking about greenwashing and comparing kind of data from 2020 where we kind of completely shifted the way we work to now, and maybe companies might say, oh, we've had a 50% improved energy output because actually it dropped significantly. But for us, it's looking at what did we learn throughout that period of our lives and are still learning, and what are those kind of things that we can take forward to continue to reduce our impact. And it's just interesting with the kind of greenwashing and external reporting point as well. So just knowing exactly what's the right thing to report and how we share that message with the external audience is a struggle. It's a big challenge. Yes, Adam, sorry, you've got your hand up there.
Coming on that, it's my pet peeve is the kind of greenwashing thing, because I think it's really the answer to all these challenges, which you are completely correct, is just transparency. Is if you're just open and honest as a business about what you've done, what your challenges are, and as you say, like your reporting period, if it's 2020, that probably is going to be lower than 2019. Therefore, benchmark 2019 and have that data there as well, and just be honest about whether you're doing that, whether you're not doing it. And that tends to avoid pretty much every greenwashing accusation, because just transparency really means that you are avoiding a lot of those common pitfalls. So I think that's the key thing really, is if you are struggling with some data, that's fine. There are valid reasons why you're struggling with that and where you might not be perfect. Just make sure you say that, because again, thinking a lot of the micro businesses I speak to, they might have looked into electric vehicles and they might not be cost effective for them, or might not be the right kind of vehicles at the minute for them due to their financing agreements. But they don't tend to say that they've even looked into it on their websites. And it's like, well, I care far more about if you've looked into it and found that it's the wrong decision and then made that decision that's informed, than just saying nothing at all. And that's the real danger, is when people are saying nothing at all. And that's when Laura mentioned, that kind of green hushing element, where if you as a business have explored a lot of options and remove those options quite correctly, that's far more vital. So really just be as transparent and as honest as you can, and you won't go far wrong. And I don't think you'll fall foul of any of the new green kind of greenwashing rules, but the CMAs, whatever it's called, I can't remember what it is now. But yeah, rant over.
No, I was just thinking of that small business we were working with in Glasgow last year. So Adam and I were partnering with a professional services provider, and they rent their building. So they were trying to switch to renewable energy, but they don't own the building, so it was the landlord's decision, and the landlord wasn't in the right place. The landlord has since changed, and they've talked to the other tenants in the building, who include people like Cisco, who've got very ambitious net zero targets. And they've sort of soft lobbied the new landlord, and have now, probably 6 months later, got agreement to switch to a renewable energy provider and are starting to get broken down proper data on exactly what their energy consumption is, rather than doing it generically and just being given a split on their floor space, so they can really start to add it into their carbon footprint and actively get a sense of the progress that they're making. For even bigger businesses who are part of this, they're still getting their heads around it. Everyone is slightly making it up and building as they sail. And I think it's absolutely fine to build as you sail. You know, the devil here will be perfectionism. We don't have time for perfectionism. So the best we can do is build as we sail and collaborate as much as we can. And that also means giving people a bit of an elbow, a hand up. You know, if you see someone who's having a struggle and you know how to help them, it's sort of reaching out. And that's partly about getting involved in the community. So Sam will know far more about this than me, but I do lots of projects in the community, but really working as a business community to solve problems together, and just having an awareness of your community. Like we did during COVID, I think one of the best outcomes was we started thinking suddenly more unconventionally about where our relationships might lie. We might even have looked to a competitor and gone, actually, we could work together and solve this problem, and it would benefit both of us. You know, in the net zero world, you don't have competition, because we all win or we all lose, and we only win when the last person crosses the line. So it sort of rips up the rule book of, I can't talk to that person about this problem anymore, because they're not a competitor, they're absolutely a collaborator to be had. You just haven't figured out how yet.
Yeah, for sure. And just that kind of team collaboration point, I just can't stress it enough. Like Protiviti especially, we've learned so much from our kind of London Bridge community and even wider, you know. So yeah, so grateful to kind of have those different thoughts and ideas, and to have input from kind of all different business sectors. It's definitely priceless. So yeah, thank you. That's super good. So just kind of as a one last round from the speakers, could we please ask, what's your one takeaway from today? And what is one improvement that you could recommend for people to do in their personal life to have a positive impact on the environment? Please. Laura, should we start with you?
Oh, what a reflector. Well, I've got a wall in front of me that says that greening your pension is 21 times more powerful at cutting your carbon footprint than stopping flying, becoming a vegetarian, and moving to a renewable energy provider combined. Wow. Which was done by Make My Money Matter Limited in 2019, based on an average salary of £30,000. So I mean, massively switching your bank is an easy win. And like Sam's business have done, they've got a pension for the planet. So they've really thought about who the pension provider is, but also a little salary sacrifice into just, you know, putting a little bit of money that way. So I don't normally think about money, but my other takeaway, I don't know, I'll probably do a plug on, don't forget to draw down. You know, while you're figuring this stuff out and working out how to reduce, you can absolutely draw down, and have a look at things like the Million Tree Pledge, because there are people who are being radically ambitious around collaborating on planting tons and tons of trees while they figure out how to, you know, it's like sucking carbon out the sky as well as chugging it up into the sky. So I think perhaps my takeaway would be Adam's point on thinking about carbon as a cost. It's a price, it's a budget. So if you can almost start to think about, you've got two budgets that you're running, one is a purely financial one and one is a carbon budget. At some point it will become priced by the government. It hasn't come yet, but in bigger businesses they already have internal carbon prices, because we haven't factored the environment in and the social side into as our stakeholders. So maybe back to Sam's point. I'm way over my one.
Thank you. No, that's all right. It's great. Thank you. And over to you then, Sam. We'll have you next if that's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so I've got direct experience of running a company where acting on the climate has been a massive net benefit to our business, never mind doing the right thing by the planet. We were at the cusp of a revolution of low carbon, right? So we're moving into a low carbon economy. I liken it to the digital revolution 30 years ago. Just look at the companies that exist now, and you can see which ones embraced digital and which ones didn't. It's exactly the same. We're in the same position, except it's low carbon and it's care for our planet. And the one thing I would say from a personal point of view is just become more carbon aware. There's a great book called How Bad Are Bananas by Mike Berners-Lee, which is the carbon footprint of everything. We need to be literate about carbon, make informed decisions about what you're consuming, and try and limit the amount of carbon that you are investing in whatever product or service that you're buying. Thank you, Loz, for modelling the book I just mentioned. Adam, you've got about 20 seconds, over to you.
Thank you.
I think to build on that really is decision making. You're already making potentially bad environmental decisions to change that around. You know, when you're ordering a breakfast, the sausage, where's that coming from? Is that coming from kind of pigs that have been fed on soybeans that have been linked to deforestation in Asia, or is it from a local farm? The eggs, where are they coming from? The tomatoes, where are they coming from? Everything you're doing is already a decision one way or another on environment. So make sure that you're just building that into your daily habits and use that as a power and not as an overwhelming thing. And that's where the book that Sam mentioned is really good, in that it is a strength, not a weakness.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. And thanks all. So just to wrap up, just wanted to say that all of the speakers, a huge thank you to you all. They have actually asked to have a donation of planted trees on their ecology pages. So we've planted 250 trees per speaker. So thank you so much for that today. We really appreciate everyone's involvement, all the questions that have come in, and hopefully see you all at Pints for the Planet, which we'll also share a link for in there, which will be cool. And thanks again, everyone. Have a nice rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, all. Have a great day.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone.